Man's Best Friend by Sabrina Carpenter, That's Showbiz Baby by Jade, The Life of a Showgirl by Taylor Swift. How are these albums related? Well, in my opinion, they all ask the question, what does it mean to be a showgirl? Being a showgirl is about performance and acting, putting on a show and facade for the audience, almost creating a whole new persona that is not the real you. And all these albums delve into that idea in some way. They exude extravagance, they bring the dance floors of the late 20th century into present day, and they put forth some overall theme and sentiment about what it means to perform and be a showgirl, or at least they try to do those things. And so I think that brings up some interesting parallels between these albums. And pay careful attention to how I'm really only talking about the albums here, not the actual artists behind them. You know, I'm not saying these artists intentionally put forth showgirly albums in an effort to like one-up each other or anything like that. Not at all. I just love talking about albums, and especially in parallel with each other because they bring out more interesting things and concepts. Being a showgirl is so broad that it can kind of apply to any pop girl to a degree. And I don't deny there have been some great releases recently that exude the showgirl persona as well. Jealous Type by Doja Cat, Where's My Husband by Ray. Now this video will largely focus on the three albums I started with because, you know, I have a lot more to say about them, but you can think of them as a case study of the concept at large. Because yeah, it's been a big motif in pop girl music for a long time, especially recently, and so I think it's a fun opportunity to talk about it at large. And in a way, this will also kind of be my review of these three albums, hence another edition of the Reviewing Recent Releases series, also known as RRR. I'm going to go through each album, give you my overall thoughts, and how they put forth their respective showgirl concept, and I'll be talking about kind of some of the similarities and differences, and where the concept works versus where it doesn't. So let's start with...
I know.
Man's Best Friend is Sabrina Carpenter's 7th studio album, coming out just 1 year after Short and Sweet. As I've discussed before, with the success of the Emails I Can't Send tour, especially songs like Nonsense and Feather, she really began to lean into this ironic, raunchy, and even defeatist style of pop music with Short and Sweet. And very soon, after the success of that album and tour, she already announced the next, with a provocative album cover and title. Now, part of me just wanted to talk about this album, hence why I'm including it. There's no denying Sabrina Carpenter herself is a showgirl, but what is showgirl-esque about this album? Well, I do think Man's Best Friend ultimately centers around an image, a persona, a girl who puts on a show, yet at her core feels lonely and confused and even a bit resentful. Throughout this album, Sabrina is going to take pride in her own craziness, her own low standards, and constant back and forth with men. In a way, it's all performance. It has to be showy. And I especially get that from the album covers. Of course, the main one was a bit controversial, and I don't think it's important to get into all of that. But these alternative ones that she did for the other vinyls, I think really show the glamour, the extravagance, and the showiness of this concept, you know? How even amidst all these feelings and internal conflict that Sabrina's going to tell us about on this album, she's still performing, she's still putting on a show for the people around her. Another way to understand this is to consider Short and Sweet, in which she was starting to get more satirical and raunchy, but you still had songs like Don't Smile and Lie to Girls, which to me felt purely emotional without like the humor of everything else on the album. Meanwhile, this is entirely embracing persona and character. Like, of course, there is still emotion, there's still an underlying story and emotional core to it as with any music, but like the funny lyrics and pure absurdism is pretty much present through every single track on this album, to the point where as a whole, you almost can't take it seriously. It has to be a performance. I think if I had to describe this album in one word, it would be ridiculous. And I mean that in the best way possible. Sabrina spends this entire album ridiculing men, but also kind of ridiculing herself for getting into these situations in the first place. And so to me, that inherent absurdism and unseriousness is Sabrina Carpenter's approach to being a showgirl, to performing, at least, you know, at this point in her career. Like, big riff coming, I need a minute. Like, come on, that is showgirl, that is performance right there built into the music. And let's get a little bit more specific into the songs, shall we? Man Child kicks things off really strong to set up, of course, themes around men that Sabrina's going to dive into. Men being stupid and childish, but how she still finds herself drawn to them. That is where she really begins to create the character, especially in the bridge, you know? I like my boys playing hard to get. I like my men all incompetent. Like, that's a show. That's theater. She's literally line dancing as she sings that. And Sabrina's really going to play into that this whole album. Case in point, track number 2, Tears, which is the most showgirl coded track of this whole album, if you ask me. From the sound being so disco driven, the aesthetic of the music video and performance being very showy, very disco again, very Vogue and ballroom inspired as well. And even the lyrics, it's raunchy, it's playful. She's building performance into the music with, you know, the moans here and there, the oh my god. Oh my god. She literally calls out for a dance break in the bridge. Like, that is showgirl.
We have to give the people what they want.
Then Sabrina dives more into the emotional story. We have the back and forth with men. Overall, I think it's pretty fun, solid music. She's very clever with her innuendos as usual. I will say the middle of the album is, I think, where it starts to lose me ever so slightly, just because, I don't know, the sound and themes do get a little bit repetitive as the album goes on. That's just my opinion, take it for what you will. And I do love this mixture of country pop, but like also ABBA-inspired disco. Sabrina's voice also just glides seamlessly over every track. You can't help but dance. I mean, these lyrics remain silly and absurd throughout the whole album, but again, you're dancing, you're having a good time, and that is the job of the showgirl. Goodbye is a very good example of that. It has that don't smile charm to it where after all the irony and self-deprecation, she's like, you know what, fuck this, I'm sick of it. But again, Don't Smile, Decode, like think about her previous album closers. They're very emotional, very heartfelt. Goodbye is still theater. It's still performance. There's this built-in funny nature to it, as with the entire album. So overall, I do personally prefer Short and Sweet and Emails I Can't Send just like as albums. I just think they're more compelling. But this album still worked. The reason being that she knows it's ridiculous and she isn't shying away from that. It would be one thing if she were trying to be self-righteous and serious about all this, but at least to my knowledge, she's not doing that. Her fans and other people might be trying to pull out some deeper meaning to this album. Sure, we can have those discussions. That's great. But in my opinion, just taken as is, this album is absurd. It's ridiculous. But that is the point. You know, when she first announced this album, she really did tease it as just like a fun, goofy project that she worked on. And now she's doing more performances. She's keeping up this image, this character she's created. It's extravagant, it's mesmerizing, and showy. And I think what that shows us is two important things about the showgirl concept in pop music. One is show don't tell. If you let the music speak for itself and you have the extravagant visuals to back it up, you can kind of get away with anything. The second thing is not being self-righteous in it. Again, not trying to extract a deeper meaning from something that doesn't have it. If it's going to be a fun, goofy album, then say so. That is what Sabrina did, and that is why it's working. It's not the raw, deep, emotional sound of Emails I Can't Send. It's not the bulletproof pop sound of Short and Sweet. It's kind of something of its own, but it comes together nicely with, again, this really hard-hitting, danceable sound. And you know what? We're clapping. We're cheering for that. I'm here for it. All right, album number 1 down, 2 more to go. Next up, we have Jade's solo debut studio album, That's Showbiz Baby. Now, this has been in the works for more than a year, with Angel of My Dreams coming out in middle of 2024. But now that it's here, there is no denying just how worth it the wait was. Long story short, this album is phenomenal. She really came through here. And so what I want to focus on is, again, how does the showgirl nature of it come through? Jade in the title is of course very explicit about this being a showgirl album, but she's not focused on the exuberance of the showgirl, but kind of the opposite, the difficulties of it, how dreams can be shattered, how glamour turns to betrayal, the insecurities of constantly being in the spotlight, the manipulation, the abuse, the objectification. These are things we kind of saw with Man's Best Friend, but she turned all this objectification and manipulation and betrayal and all these disgusting things into an ironic comedy of sorts, making it absurd. Whereas Jade is really going to show us the tragic side of it, the tragedy of a showgirl, and she's not going to back down. On track 2, It Girl, she sings, "Throw me them roses, well that's just showbiz, baby, won't sugarcoat it, you make me feel sick." That's kind of the theme of this whole album. Jade calls out how people dismiss this kind of abuse and manipulation as a natural part of the business. That's just showbiz, baby. You have to deal with it. But Jade is tired of that, and she's fighting back. And on first listen, it could sound a little played out, but I think it works really well here for two key reasons. First, Jade is never being too obvious or self-righteous about it. She's giving us a genuine emotional story here that is built throughout the entire album, and so this calling out of the manipulation, calling out these double standards and the issues of the industry, it feels earned within just the music itself, without any context, without any knowledge of Jade's life and all the horrible, horrible things that she's been through. It still feels earned. She sets these ideas up very clearly on the first two tracks, Angel of My Dreams and It Girl, but those are the only two tracks that are explicitly like being a showgirl sucks, talking about the manipulation of the industry and her desire to break free. Angel of My Dreams sets up how showbiz is something she idolizes, she's done it for so long, she keeps coming back to it and she loves it, even though it treats her horribly. It Girl then sees her dive further into the objectification, but it's a little more dancey, it's a little more KUNTY, and as Jade herself says, this bitch can't be controlled, she is breaking free. It's a great setup, and what's better is beyond that, each song just really focuses on its own story without being explicit about those themes of manipulation. Fuck You For Now is a story of betrayal and loving someone but acknowledging they did something wrong. Plastic Box is a story of being jealous of a lover's ex and wanting this person all to yourself. Self-Saboteur is about self-sabotage. Lip Service is about getting down and dirty on your partner. Headache is about Jade being a headache to everyone around her and kind of acknowledging that but wishing she was different. Natural at Disaster and Glitch then turn the issues back onto the other person, showing manipulation and betrayal. So this album is full of all these different little vignettes, all these different stories, but you can see how they still all come together under the showgirl umbrella that she set up on tracks 1 and 2. She loves this industry, she wants it to work, but it keeps stabbing her in the back, it keeps screwing her over. And Jade lets us figure that story out for ourselves. The second thing is that the production backs all of this up. While the lyrics are emotional and serious, the production is loud, showy, and most of all, it's really creative. Remember what I said about Sabrina Carpenter's album. Despite the emotional stuff going on, despite how absurd the lyrics are, you're still dancing, you're still having a good time, which is very important to portray and keep up this showgirl act, right? Now with Jade, even though the lyrics are far more emotional and serious and, again, really calling out a lot of bad things in the industry, the sound is still very dancey, it's very fun and energetic, it's creative, so you're still having a good time while listening, which again ties into this whole theme of like being a showgirl is fun, making music is fun, she loves the industry despite its issues. The production on this album does a lot to play around with Jade's voice, it plays with tempo, it plays with instrumentation, it honestly might be the most creative sounding album I've heard all year. It's hard to describe, you just kind of have to listen and hear it for yourself. Once again, the showgirl concept, at least the way Jade plays it, is inherently self-victimizing, but because the album sounds so creative, because Jade takes her time telling all these stories in unique, experimental, interesting, but danceable ways, and Jade's voice is truly in it the whole time, it feels 100% deserved. Another great example I didn't mention is the closing track, Silent Disco. With Man's Best Friend and The Life of a Showgirl, as we'll see, the closing tracks are inherently showy and play into that aesthetic. Here, the closing track is purely romantic. It's just about a relationship blossoming with someone and how it allows her to exit the noise of the world. She's not saying anything about show business. She's not being theatrical. If anything, this is the most real, authentic, genuine track of the whole album. But being the closer and taking the context of everything we've heard, it just feels like such a satisfying, powerful ending. She's putting aside all the noise of the industry, these insecurities, these fears, and even her dreams, and she's just living in this moment with her lover. It's beautiful. So overall, Jade kind of spins the showgirl concept on its head, but still executes such a flawless story, again, through two main things. One, show don't tell, similar to Sabrina, and two, by having a really creative, danceable sound that still keeps you hooked and interested in everything going on while you're listening, while you're taking in the story. This truly feels like a look behind the curtain, showing us what actually goes on for a showgirl in a really beautiful way. If you can't tell, I adore this album. You really, really have to listen if you haven't already. And with that, we're going to move into...
You don't know the life of a showgirl, babe, and you're never gonna wanna...
finally, we have Taylor Swift's highly anticipated 12th album, The Life of a Showgirl, which came out most recently. It's all anything anyone can talk about since it's released. And boy oh boy, this one's a doozy. I did a whole predictions video on this album based on everything Taylor set up, and it pains me to say I got pretty much nothing right. And I think that is a reflection less of my own ability to make predictions, but more so how the concept of this album, being the life of a showgirl, does not achieve what it set out to do. Because I know I wasn't the only person thrown off. And it has nothing to do with whether you like or don't like this album. Even people I know who liked this album and enjoy it acknowledge that it has almost nothing to do with the concept that she set up. And if you can't tell by now, I've been using these other showgirl-esque albums and talking about how their concepts worked to provide some context as to why I think Taylor's did not, at least as she probably intended. More than any other album here, this is the one where the promotion was so devoted to the showgirl aesthetic and almost like pushed on our faces, and yet it's the one that probably did that concept the worst. As we saw with both Man's Best Friend and That's Showbiz Baby, if you let the audience put the pieces together and make their own interpretations of the music, it can really shine a lot more than when you push a certain interpretation first, especially when the music then doesn't actually live up to that interpretation, which is, in my opinion, exactly the issue with The Life of a Showgirl. After you listen to this album, it doesn't feel earned. It doesn't really make sense at all. A lot of people are really fighting tooth and nail to defend this album, saying it's lighthearted, it's happy, it's fun, which, yeah, that's right. There is nothing wrong with putting out something that's more lighthearted and happy and fun. As we saw earlier with Man's Best Friend, that can work wonders for you and still evoke a showgirl-esque feeling. But that's not what Taylor advertised. She wanted the intricate storytelling of Folklore and Evermore to mesh with the showy, extravagant nature of pop music and her work with Max Martin and Shellback. So you end up with some songs that do achieve that, and others that don't, making for an album where the showgirl herself doesn't seem to know what she wants to do. Does she want to hide away and tell us the dark secrets of the world, or does she just want to be silly and dance on stage? By the end of the album, you don't actually know. And that's why this Life of a Showgirl narrative ultimately fails, in my opinion. It feels disjoint. Regardless of whether you like Man's Best Friend or That's Showbiz Baby, you can't deny how consistent those albums are. If there's one thing The Life of a Showgirl lacks most, in my opinion, it's consistency. This album actually starts off super strong. The first 4 songs perfectly fit what she set out to do. They have the storytelling that Taylor does really well on Folklore and Midnights, setting scenes up, building a narrative from start to finish, where there's emotion, there's something palpable and tense, but it's not super in your face. It's almost mysterious and sinister in a way. I could easily imagine these songs being tracks on Folklore if they were just produced more acoustically, but here, she has the really catchy, addicting melodies, of course, Max Martin's influence, and it makes for anthems that can be danced to but still give you that behind the curtain look. That is exactly what Taylor said she'd set out to do, and I think these first 4 tracks achieve that perfectly. And even if the production wasn't as exciting as I think I hoped for it to be and a lot of people hoped for it to be, it was still doing all the things you need to do for a showgirl concept. It was utilizing show don't tell, it was not being self-righteous, and it had a deeper emotional core while still being danceable and fun. The showgirl concept was working, it was coherent, it was unique, it was fun. I was cheering. And then I stopped cheering very soon after that. The consistency of this album quickly falls off. And that's because, again, the rest of this album doesn't actually commit to the concept. You either have love songs that are kind of corny, like Eldest Daughter and Wood, songs that are very self-righteous in this sad, lonely girl getting picked on behind the curtain image, like Actually Romantic and Cancelled, and cute, but just kind of played out love songs like Wishlist and Honey. Again, if the intention from the start was just to be lighthearted and have fun and goof around, then sure, you could call this a showgirl album, but that wasn't the intention. And that is why, again, all this defense of the album saying, it's just lighthearted, you guys just hate it when Taylor's happy, it doesn't work. You have, again, the first 4 tracks, which are great. You have a song like Ruin the Friendship, which is incredibly tragic and heartbreaking, and puts forth a very genuine message about not losing out on chances, which I think is very relevant to The Life of a Showgirl. And then you have the closing track, the title track, The Life of a Showgirl, which is very, very self-righteous, saying, the life of a showgirl, it's a lot harder than you'd think, and that would work, but it doesn't feel earned. Like, what did we do to get here? What are these struggles? You've only talked about that on like 2 songs. So if the album is so lighthearted and happy and we can't be taking it so seriously, like people are saying, then the final track entirely falls flat because it's trying to be serious. If you're too self-righteous in being a showgirl and going behind the curtain, the album comes across as trying to be something that it's not. As discussed with Jade's album, that album is also pretty self-righteous and self-victimizing in a similar way, but the reason it works there is because it's executed through isolated stories that show the struggles of the life girl rather than just telling us and making us believe it. Meanwhile, the songs on this album, in the second half at least, that try to give us that emotion, that sense of it, just end up being kind of cringy and childish, and a big part of it is, yes, the lyrics. Taylor Swift is not writing well. The showgirl concept is already so theatrical and so self-glamorizing that it really relies on show don't tell, which Taylor Swift, of all people, is normally really good at. But I think because she wanted the concept to really come through here, she wanted it to be obvious, she wanted it, I guess, to be somewhat lighthearted and fun, it ended up working against her. Because again, you have some songs that are very show don't tell, you have other songs that are goofy and silly. It doesn't work. It does not come together nicely. Another issue that a lot of people are pointing out is that the album is mostly love songs, which is fine, but then call it Lover 2.0 or something. Like, you can do that, Taylor. You can literally do anything you want. The love songs on this album are pretty good. Again, Opalite I think is really wonderful. Wishlist and Honey can be a little bit corny at times, but I get by with them. They're fun. They're cute. Just like some of the songs on Lover, right? So if you put it forth as a love album, it works. But those cute moments are getting overshadowed because that's not what she set up. If your whole life behind the curtain was just your blooming relationship with Travis Kelce, then make that the concept you set out to tell. Not exuberance, not bright lights and shiny orange confetti, not vanilla perfume and sweat. None of that is here. So that's the first big disconnect this album has with the showgirl concept. The second issue, I think, is the sound. It does not live up to the concept either. As I discussed with other albums, the sound being extravagant and dancey helps communicate the messages a lot. Being the thing that Taylor Swift emphasized the most going into this album, her working with Max Martin and Shellback, the people she worked with on Reputation in 1989, two of her most energetic sounding albums, this one kind of disappoints in that regard. I think the only songs that truly achieved the loud pop sound needed for this concept were Fate of Ophelia, Elizabeth Taylor, maybe Opalite. I love Father Figure lyrically, but sonically, it's not quite there. I mean, check out my remix with Style. Okay, that shit devours.
Before you know you're drowning.
But anyways, it's just not extravagant like we anticipated, which is fine, but taken that way for a showgirl album with these big visuals, these big expectations, it feels like Taylor again had an album that she really liked and slapped the showgirl concept on it because she knew how much people loved the Eras Tour, she knew people were gonna go crazy for it, which they did, which I did, bitch, but it didn't actually live up to that. I'm kind of skirting around my thoughts on the actual album and music itself, one, because I want to focus on the showgirl concept as discussed here, and two, because I am going to give it a little bit more time before I give you guys like my dedicated thoughts and review of this album. I mean, I could go on, but I kind of want the initial fervor of the release to wear off because right now the opinions are just way too heated to say anything proper about this album, and I really don't want to sound like a hater because there's already enough haters out there, and I'm not a hater. I really like a good number of songs on this album, but undeniably, this is not the life of a showgirl. It's not. And looking at it in the context of at least Man's Best Friend and That's Showbiz Baby, I think helps illuminate some of the reasons why. It's definitely not an easy concept to center an entire album around, that's for sure, because once again, the inherent job of a pop girl is to be a showgirl, right? You're performing, you're putting on a show for an audience. So what is special about your take on that job that makes your showgirl album worth listening to? As we saw with Man's Best Friend, you can either be entirely absurdist and defeatist about it. As we saw with Jade, you can craft a very well-designed story with creative sounds that justify why you get to tell this story. With Taylor, we saw some inklings of that and a genuine attempt to tell a powerful, interesting life of a showgirl story, especially for the person who had the biggest showgirl era of literally all time, but ultimately a failure to tell that story. And the concept just ultimately came across as forced more than anything, which is really easy to fall into again for a concept like this. So what's critical is the music has to be able to stand on its own without any pre-explanation, without all this setup. It must be earned. I had a lot of fun making this analysis and talking about these albums in this kind of parallel way, so if you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like down below, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. It would truly mean the world to me. And again, I have a lot more to say about Taylor, so if you're interested to hear, stay tuned for that. But that's going to be all for this one. I'll see you soon. Okay, bye!